Hello and welcome to this very special podcast all the way from Dublin, Ireland. My name is Andre Griffin. I'm a filmmaker and freelance photographer, and I'm joined today with a very special guest who will now introduce himself.
Hello, my name is Conor. I am a cinephile, or film buff if I was to sound more normal. I am a design graduate. I've always had a special interest in film and an aspiring writer, and I am looking forward to talking about the subject of this podcast.
And the subject today is a filmmaker from the Midwest called Sam Raimi. He's one of my favorite filmmakers, probably my favorite. I'm not sure where he ranks in your department.
He is a favorite. I've always been interested in his work.
And of course, we were children of the late 90s, so we grew up with the Spider-Man films, and that spun out into his other endeavors. But recently, last year I graduated from a 4-year course, and as a sort of treat to myself, I decided I would buy every single film that Sam Raimi made in the best quality possible. And then I thought, well, why don't me and my good friend watch them, and we can then choose their merits and rank them accordingly.
I suppose I'm the only one mad enough to I'm the only one mad enough to out of your friend group.
Let's just lay the rules right off the bat. What are we discussing? Well, we're discussing every film that Sam Raimi has directed. Now, this does not include short films, the latest of which was a film released for Make-A-Wish Foundation called The Black Giandola in 2017. We're not doing his television directing works, of which he directed 2 episodes of a show called Rake, 3 episodes of an anthology, 50 States of Fright, and the pilot for Ash vs. Evil Dead. And also, we're not doing any films that he produced or executive produced. Those could be a marathon of themselves. You've got films from The Grudge to Time Cop to the direct-to-video Darkman sequels to Evil Dead Rise, which is coming out this summer, which I'm very excited about.
Irish director.
I know, very exciting. So he wrote in the 80s to 90s 3 movies, 2 of which he requested his name be taken off because he wasn't happy with how they turned out, Easy Will and The Nut House. So there's only one other credit, which isn't director, is The Hudsucker Proxy, which of course was directed by his friends, the Coen brothers. But yeah, so how this is going to work is we're going to discuss Sam Raimi's films ranked individually. And just so we're completely transparent, yes, we are completely taking this format from the lovely fellas Jay and Rich at Red Letter Media. We think their John Carpenter ranking video was terrific, and so we thought, why not do it for another director? I would very much love it if they tackled Sam themselves, but hopefully you'll settle for us for the time being.
Well, it's like that old saying, if you want something done, do it yourself.
So without further ado, we'll get into it. Throughout the early January of this year, we watched all 15 films, spread over 7 days, and I think for the most part we had a very enjoyable time of it. But yeah, so how we're going to do this is we're going to, I guess, pick mine to discuss, but I'll ask firstly what yours is, Conor, and then we'll move from there. So 15 films, let's get started. And what is your number 15, Conor?
My number 15 Sam Raimi film is one of his forgotten late 90s ones, and for good reason, For Love of the Game.
Well, that's very convenient because that's at my bottom pick too.
Billy Chappell is 40 years old, arm weary and aching. And you know, Steve, I have a feeling Billy Chappell isn't pitching against the Yankees. He's pitching against time.
Yeah, this is the closest I think we came to really disliking a film. Like, it was honestly, out of these 15, it was the only film that I really struggled with. We took our equivalent of smoke breaks, which is we'd pause the movie every 20 minutes so we could talk stuff or just do anything else to distract ourselves. It was sort of funny. Going into this film, we thought the problem was going to be that we're not very big sportophiles, especially in baseball terms.
Yeah, we were always sort of the artsy kind of people at school. I especially was. I couldn't stand sports.
So it was kind of that thing where, well, we're going to be a bit biased and we might not understand the appeal of this movie because we don't get sports.
And we're not American.
No. But honestly, the sport element was the part of the movie I enjoyed the most. I think Raimi really, if there's anything this movie does well, Raimi really honestly does convey a nice scope and a longing for baseball. Where this movie fails, utterly and totally, is the romance. So what's the plot about? The plot is basically Kevin Costner is playing a baseball player, and he falls in love for some woman he sees on the side of the road for no particular reason. And the next 2.5 hours are them bickering and moaning about things that just don't convey any real drama or any real substance. And you just want to do anything but continue to watch them squabble.
Yes, it's absolutely dire. Like I really did not like this film. It's just the word I kept thinking of. It's a wonderful word, and I think it perfectly describes this film. Anemic. It is an incredibly anemic film. Like, this is not Sam Raimi's longest film, but it felt the longest. It was just there's none of the flourish. There's none of the panache. That's another wonderful word. There's none of the Sam Raimi panache. There's one or two little bits. I remember seeing someone say that the bit where Kevin Costner cuts his hand open is kind of like Sam Raimi trying to exercise some of the horror stuff. But even that's kind of you know, it's still kind of restrained a bit. Although it did lead to an absolutely incredible, so bad it's good kind of breakdown from Kelly Preston, where she just starts raging at the hospital because they can't get the staff, and Costner's going into shock, and she just starts wrong. Is this not America?
Is baseball not America's favorite pastime?
And we were just there. We had to just stop because we were just like
on the floor.
Yeah.
It's what really doesn't help that scene is they play it completely straight, and Basil Podoros' great score is just thundering at the forefront, and it just makes it all like the best Zucker Brothers spoof that ever was, practically.
It really does feel like a Zucker Brothers film. Like it's the film. No, it's not a Zucker Brothers film. It's the film that the Zucker Brothers parody. Like it's like this would not be out of place in those rote, cringy Ronald Reagan films that Warner Brothers used to put out, which they almost quote word for word in Airplane. Actually, another great line. It's bad when you start thinking I would much rather be watching I'd much rather be watching Airplane. That's what I kept saying. It's a very dull film. I think the reason one of the things you said why I was so repelled by it is that it has everything that I do not like as someone who has an interest in filmmaking.
No,
because it's very kind of it's a competent film, but there's no sort of soul. Like this is the thing. One of the things that I gravitated to with Sam Raimi is that there was always a sort of energy behind the camera, and that doesn't necessarily mean you can't do like a sort of more slower paced film. But I think that this film did not warrant the length that it had. I think it's stunted by the length, if you know what I mean. I think it's really sort of sunk. It's just,
I think what we discovered on watching all of Sam's films is that regardless of the quality of the film, he keeps the thing moving. Sam's probably the best out there of pacing. Like, his films are always moving regardless of the quality.
Economic is the word that we use.
And this was the one film where it really felt like a drag at points. It's very much, you see, what you kind of have to accept on the outset is this isn't really a Sam Raimi film. It's very much a star vehicle for Kevin Costner. And I'm sure he's a very good actor in other stuff, but here he is just sleepwalking through it. And it doesn't help that he and Kelly Preston have next to zero chemistry whatsoever. It's what this film is for me was it's just one of those films where whatever it does, you haven't seen done better in another film. The baseball aspect, the romance, it's just an absolute by-the-numbers Hollywood affair. It's almost infuriating because I couldn't even get mad at it from a technical perspective because technically it's made by some wonderful people, working at Universal. So,
the score is very nice. Basil Podoros was a terribly underrated composer. Like, he did so many great. The
score is great. You get some wonderful supporting cast throughout. You get John C. Reilly, Brian Cox, J.K. Simmons, and it's just all for a story that's very middling. And quite frankly, you just don't care for Kevin Costner's character because, he's a very well-off baseball player, and every other supporting cast member seems to like him. He's no opposition in this film. So you're like, well, where's the drama? Where's the threat? You know, it is what it is. It's a star vehicle, and the star just can't carry the film, and Sam's just trailing him behind. So yeah, I think For Love of the Game is very much a film that I think is not unwatchable, but it is just background music, I think, for the majority of households out there.
And it really stands out to us because we, were watching like up to that point. We'd gone to 8 films and they had that sort of Sam Raimi stamp on them. This is very much the kind of film that, you probably would see while sort of channel hopping on television, and it'd probably be on like Channel 5 or something. It'd be on Channel 5 or Virgin Media, and you just sort of you'd look at it for 5 seconds and just be like, no, that's not for me.
So number 14, Connor, what would yours be?
Number 14 is Oz the Great and Powerful.
Oz the Great and Powerful. Well, we've synced up a second time.
Are you the great man we've been waiting for?
This is what I call an orphan film, in that it's a film that nobody wants. Fans of the original Oz adaptations don't care for it. Fans of the Garland film don't care for it.
And I am one of them.
Disney fans don't care for it. It didn't develop enough fans when it came out. Sam Raimi fans don't care for it. It's just very much an unloved film. It's whereas other films become cult favorites, or at least are held on by a strong following of sorts, this one's just been left to the dirt. And really, I felt kind of bad for it in some respects. Like, for a time, this was going to be my number 13, but I just kind of had to put it at 14. And it is a shame because there is a lot of good stuff in this film, I felt. This was the first film I saw in IMAX back in 2013, and ultimately it was an enjoyable theater experience. Like, right off the get, I mean, everyone makes this observation, but yeah, it is Army of Darkness. The plot is Army of Darkness.
Oz the Great and Powerful is Army of Darkness without Ash and Bruce Campbell. That's what it is.
Oz the Great and Powerful, I mean, right off the bat, I think that the structure is a lot stronger than the next film on this list, in my case. I think that it has a very decent, the hero plot. I think a lot of the supporting cast are done well. I think a lot of the visuals are nice, if not the best CGI. I will give this movie all the credit in the world during that time where every film was trying to be this murky, grungy looking film, that this one's bold and bright and colorful.
Yeah, like it's such a like aesthetically ugly era of cinema, isn't it? Like,
I think what really sinks this film, like what really keeps it from being because I didn't, and I hope that a lot of people didn't want to directly compare to this because it was a losing battle. It doesn't matter how good you are, you're not going to compete to the 1939 film. That's a losing battle right off the bat. I was coming into this film very much as just an Oz fan in general, and hoping that it would be a fun little adventure, and for the most part it is. But the biggest thing that sinks this movie for me is, well, there's two elements. First is two very miscast leads. I think James Franco and Mila Kunis were awfully cast for these characters. James Franco, I mean, look, regardless of what you think of him, he's just terribly miscast in this film. He can't play a con man very well. His default whenever he's sort of running out of things to do in a scene is just to have the most shit-eating grin possible. That's like his one thing he can do. Just Mila Kunis doesn't fare much better. Her character's written with the mentality of a 5-year-old girl, and when Sam Raimi and crew want her to, it's a spoiler from 10 years ago, when she does become the Wicked Witch of the West, she is truly dreadful. There's no other nice way of putting it. She doesn't have any charisma, scare factor, or even charm. She is just very much, it's so miscast. Like, I mean, some actors will surprise you. It's like, pretty boy Heath Ledger as the Joker, but Mila Kunis she can't do it. Like, you pointed out that even when she laughs, it's not her laughing, it's some stand-in.
It just, you're right. Of course, it's not going to be the MGM Wizard of Oz. But like, there are still great actors out there, and I think it's sort of the one thing as well is that the film sort of it sort of toes the line between like sort of homage and copyright infringement. There was a whole there was a whole thing of how Warner Brothers and Disney were at each other's throats at the times, like, don't you make it look like our film, like they were rushing out. It's just the soul is off. I feel very much like Roald Dahl felt watching Gene Wilder in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It's just the sort of emotional connection to the film is not right. It's like sort of trying on clothes that don't fit. Mila Kunis, I'm sure she's lovely, but she's no Margaret Hamilton, and Franco is no Frank Morgan. But one thing I do remember from was watching is I think I did really like Rachel Weisz and Michelle Williams. I think they kind of fit more as
they get the tone of this film. They get they're making a children's fairy tale.
And I remember we were watching it with our friend Luke, and Luke said, because it was so like soul crushing when like she sort of finally becomes like she finally reveals herself as the Wicked Witch when the sort of the necklace comes off, and it was like, oh, there's someone who knows the tone and like actually looks like it could actually be scary,
a proper
and
creepy hag cackling away and stuff.
There's someone who I think could have matched like Margaret Hamilton, or who could have done as great a job, and it's just
I don't know if it was, I can't tell. Like, this is the problem when you are, as I called it, an orphan film. There's not really anybody tracking down interviews or trying to compile a production history. I don't know if it was more the studio or if it was Mila Kunis and her representatives. No, she can't be made too ugly. You're casting a very attractive actress. But
is it a studio note? Is that what they call it? Yeah.
But it's like, but the makeup's toned down, so her chin and nose are very truncated. But even right down to her costume. I mean, I like parts of it, but it is just, let's have leather bound, sexy Wicked Witch of the West, which
terrible idea.
Terrible idea. But that also plays into the second biggest issue I have with this film, which is the Wicked Witch of the West's origin in this is utter rubbish. It
is absolutely.
She falls in love with Oz because she has the mentality of a 5-year-old girl, and then she just decides that he spited her, so that means she eats a green apple, and that makes her into the Wicked Witch of the West. Da, 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 da. It's a garbage fanfic is what it is.
Yes, that is absolutely the case. I remember when we were sort of watching this, and I was like, okay, it starts off, like it's not too bad. I do kind of appreciate them sort of starting off the film very much like the original, like although black and white more so than sepia, where you have that, and I was like, oh, I see what you're doing there, and then I think when it like they sort of try and make the wizard sort of a fabled like sort of prophecy thing, and I was just like, oh god, it's just okay, the balloons popped, okay, it's I just realized the joke there, the
balloons popped,
the fucking hot air balloon the fucking hot air balloon's gone, like the sort of as the, I know it's a bad reference, but it's like Rotten Tomatoes said it has a deflated sense of wonder, and that just deflates the whole.
Yeah,
the Merry Old Land of Oz does not work when it's got that sort of baggage, and even when it does the big sort of storming of the Emerald City, I'm just a bit like, I don't think this is really this isn't really to the spirit of it, like, and I think I said as well, like, it doesn't really work with sort of that sort of big out, sort of war. It's the digital world as well. Now the film does alright here, but there's a wonderful quote by Roger Ebert from his review of it, and this is kind of the one that it stuck with me it stuck with me sort of watching it. A bigger yellow brick road is not necessarily a better one. And that's kind of how I feel about the film. I think I'll give it this over the love of the game. It has for love of the game. That it feels more like a Raimi film. Like if there's one director who could do scary flying monkeys, it's probably Sam Raimi. Sam Raimi's sort of vision, shall we say, is more suited to that. But again, it's just
at its core, what's really damning this production is a one toe in the water reluctance to completely disregard the 1939 film, and also just to completely badly cast leads. And at its core, if you don't relate to your lead actors, then you don't have a movie.
It's a little bit like Superman Returns, although I can say it's a lot better than Superman Returns, but it has that same kind of
Brandon Ross,
same kind of quality of like sort of wanting to pay tribute to the past, but kind of not really wanting to go all the way. Kind of the words we like. Well, the words you like to use a lot are having your cake and eating it, and this is a film that tries to do that and doesn't succeed.
So your number 13, Connor.
My number 13 is the absolute insanity of Crime Wave.
Well, we've synced once more time.
By day, they're obnoxious. By night, they're a crime wave.
Crime Wave is the film that Sam Raimi will never want to talk about at length, and I don't blame him. It was, by all accounts, a hellish production. But judging the film as a film on its own and its own merits, I think it's honestly a very compellingly strange piece. It's got a lot of intriguing stuff in it, some really crazy performances. You've got some very standout set pieces like the kitchen fight, the dining room fight, I should say, with the carpet. But ultimately, what you have is a film with no real direction. I mean, there's no plot to this film whatsoever.
It's the film that ran away from itself.
Yes, the first 5 minutes set up a kind of vague enough plot line involving a business merger and a sellout, and then the movie just says, to heck with that, let's just scene after scene of hijinks and insanity, and that's it for the next 80 minutes. The best way I've ever heard Crime Wave described is by a British comedian who said, Crime Wave is the ultimate equivalent of watching a movie late at night on television and wondering if it was just a fever dream the next day. It really is that, where by the end of it, you really you don't know what was accomplished, if anything was accomplished. You don't know really what the stakes were, if there were stakes to begin with. It really is just a one in a lifetime experience. And this is the thing, I really honestly found a lot to enjoy in this film. I think some of the standouts, the late Edward R. Pressman he of course was a producer, didn't intend to be cast in the film, but Sam sort of by Bruce Campbell's Bruce Campbell asserted that Sam Raimi sort of bullied him into the film, and he's honestly, I think, wonderful. Like his sort of stiff, strange performance really lends to some very big laughs.
Oh yeah, we were in bits where he just screams, "Get away from that fucking window!"
And Brian James, I think he really gives some very fun stuff. He gets completely the tone of what he's going for.
Our friend Luke lost it. Where it's that scene where he's with Yvonne, and you know he's got her sort of held captive over the other side, and he's pretending to be her to the lead Reed Burney. Vic, yes, that's the name of the character, and you know, like he's just it's all very soppy and sentimental, and Sam loves to get a bit sentimental. He doesn't sort of half-arse the sentimentality, and he just leaves and he goes, "What a turkey."
What a turkey.
Yeah. We lost our shit at that.
But you've raised an interesting point, which is we've gone this far in the discussion and we have not mentioned our lead. And looking at my list and your list, I think what connects these three films that we've talked about so far in Sam's, and I will say, I think moving forward, I think we can both agree these are the only three quote-unquote messy or bad Raimi films.
Yes.
Like the next films, I think, are a massive leap as far as genuinely enjoyable films we'd recommend highly.
For sure.
But what really unites these three films is just badly cast leads. It's like Kevin Costner, James Franco, and what was his name?
Reed Burney, I believe is his name.
Yeah, it's just the lead actors of these three films just don't fit Raimi's strengths, and they're certainly not well written. And so the problem with Crime Wave is originally, and this is all up for grabs because it could have been changed through production, but what Sam wanted out of Crime Wave was he wanted to make a far more harder hitting thriller film. It was sort of like the Three Stooges but R-rated, and which is what he accomplished with his next film. Yes. And he wanted Bruce Campbell to be in the film, playing more what he would play in Army of Darkness, a snarky fella a smug fella who has to be taken down a peg. But what the studio did was they looked at the rushes, went, oh god, this is getting away from us, and they basically tried to make it a very stock comedy of the era. A Porky's, Airplane, Revenge of the Nerds, and
Police Academy. You have the indicator Blu-ray, and the front cover, the main one they use is the I think the VHS one, which is kind of pushing it as a bit more of a horror. And then on the reverse is the poster of how it was advertised, and it's that sort of all characters in a lineup, Police Academy style thing, you know?
Oh yeah. And this is best exemplified in the main character of Victor, who is the most stock nothing nerd character of the 80s.
Yeah.
It's like if you compare Victor to how Raimi and Maguire would later tackle Peter Parker, it's night and day. I mean, he's got nothing to him other than he's a nerd and he wants a girlfriend. And there's just nothing. I mean, I don't wish to speak badly of the actor. He did the best he could, but it's just a nothing character, and he just doesn't suit. The actor does not suit Raimi's sensibilities as a leading actor. He doesn't do comedy like Bruce and Sam mesh perfectly with. So, don't really have much else to say. I think Crime Wave. Honestly, I am recommending it. I think Crime Wave. There's a Shout Factory Blu-ray if you're living in America. There's an Indicator Blu-ray where it's still available right now. That it's a limited number. But honestly, I would generally recommend Crime Wave. It's a strange, fascinating relic of filmmaking. I'm sure everyone on the production still has restless nights remembering it. It's very much that scene from Top Secret where they think they're back in school and then they wake up and they're just being beaten by Nazis. And they're like, oh, thank God. It's just a dream. But
Top Secret, you mentioned Top Secret. I think that's the closest sort of comparison you can make to the film. It is very like Top Secret, and even the director even one of the directors behind it sort of said, I kind of think, it didn't really sort of work. It kind of, we were kind of just sort of, it kind of just started off as sort of one joke and it kind of spun off into a film. I don't know if it really had enough to keep it going, whereas Airplane and Police Squad kind of have enough that you can make out of it. Really, I think Sam clearly loves the screwball films, the sort of screwball comedies in the 1940s, and is very much trying to reintroduce that and do it a bit sort of 80s, do it a bit sort of heightened 80s, a bit more sort of darker, a little bit more black comedy. But as said, I think the film sort of runs away with him. I think Sam himself in the documentary, the Channel 4 Incredibly Strange Film Show, he said, I wanted it to be the ultimate in entertainment. He sort of tried to do too many things, because it's very much a director sort of one indie director's bad habits clashing with sort of more of the establishment. Because Sam Raimi's, I always get the sense, as Del Toro says, Sam Raimi kind of has a very sort of anti-authority kind of impulsive kind of filmography, and this film is kind of trying to be molded into something that it's not, and it's a good curio if you love Sam Raimi's films, but I don't know if you can recommend it, sadly.
Yeah. Crime Wave is a film I would recommend strongly for Sam Raimi fans, and if you really are in the mind for a very out there movie experience that I can emphasize is unlike any other film you'll ever see, I would definitely recommend Crime Wave. But for the general audience out there, people who just want to see a good rockin' movie, moving on, we really take a leap in quality. So that's number 13.
A suitably unlucky number for Crime Wave.
Yes, indeed. So what's number 12?
The most recent one he directed, number 12, is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
Right. Now, this is probably going to be the one part of my list that will annoy most Raimi fans, but I had to put it here just because it was my opinion. My number 12 is Drag Me to Hell.
Soon it will be you who comes begging to me.
I want to stress right off the bat, I really enjoyed this film. It has a lot of good stuff in it, and I really had a good time. But there was just always this feeling of I was watching it from a distance, if that makes sense. Whereas all the other of Sam's films, even the bad ones, I was fully invested and in the film right then and there. Sam's films have a way of just immersing you. Whereas with Drag Me to Hell, I always felt like I was watching it from afar.
You were the man with the microscope.
Indeed. So, I mean, this is a film that as I was watching it, I was really appreciating like the cast, the writing, the setups, the whole premise of the film. It's basically the greatest creep show that never was. But the biggest issue I had with it was just simply, I just felt the whole time this film was very much made with I don't think he was falling back on his tricks. What I think he was doing was he maybe was throwing his fans a bit more of a bone than usual.
Yes.
He was saying, look, fans, I'm
doing it for the fans.
Yes, exactly.
I'm doing it for the horror people.
Exactly. And so this was the film Sam Raimi made immediately after Spider-Man 3. And what you get from it is very much a film of a palate cleanser. This is the piece of ginger you eat while at a sushi restaurant. Because Sam's, been working for practically a decade in Spider-Man blockbuster territory, and he's very much getting the chance to just stretch his wings and just stretch the muscles and get back to sort of more less daunting tasks.
You know what fans are like. They're kind of like, oh, you've forgotten your roots. You know, you're kind of you're not doing horror anymore. Why are you not doing horror anymore? You know what they're like.
Yeah, exactly. I think Drag Me to Hell really is, in many respects, a really stellar film, and I really had a lot of fun with it. But it was just a film where I just couldn't fully immerse myself into it. I always just felt I was one step back from it. I would still very much. I mean, this is a massive leap of quality from the last pick, Crime Wave. I mean, I don't want people to think that I only think it's slightly better. No, we've really jumped. But I still just have to say, it's for me, it wasn't a disappointing experience, but I just always was hoping for more out of it.
It's very Stephen King. It's kind of funny. It's funny that like Stephen King kind of got the word out for Evil Dead, and yet Sam has yet to actually do like a Stephen King film. And this one reminded me a lot of Thinner. It kind of has a similar sort of premise of a very someone does a not very nice thing, although in Stephen King's case, you know, he runs over someone, you know, so it's a bit stronger in Stephen King's world, but you know, so you know, really sort of the main character is put through the ringer and isn't a very decent isn't a very decent person. I think
I assume it was what Sam's intention was he cast this actress who is like the spitting image of a Disney fairy tale princess.
She was in Big Fish, the Tim Burton film with Ewan McGregor.
You know, she just walks on the scene and she just has this sweet little voice and couldn't hurt a fly. And the film just shows how she just goes slowly and it just shows that underneath all that charm and sweet apple pie, there's a darkness to her, and there's very much a sort of unflinching. You can tell that through life she's sort of gotten what she's wanted, and there's just kind of this, you know, as long as she's doing well, like she lies to other characters about the reasons for why this is happening to her. She says in one scene, you know, she could never hurt an animal, and then next scene. So I really found that kind of compelling in that, you know,
yeah.
It's not one of those, the mask is revealed to show a horrible person, but it's just very much a person that is a lot more willing to do harm so they can at least get out of jail free card.
When people, well, let's be honest, when people do desperate, you know, when people are desperate, they'll do horrible things.
Oh yeah, having done a 4-year English media film course,
this was on your syllabus.
This is definitely, out of all of these films, the one that I felt the most, this would make a very interesting little essay piece, because there is a lot you can discuss about you know, about modernity, the middle class, trying to move up in the ladder, capitalism, you know, and yeah, I felt
status is a big sort of theme.
She's like a country girl farm, and she wants to very much shed that image and be sort of the perfect little girlfriend.
She meets Justin Long's parents, and they're all kind of, oh right, and you know, they're all like high society, don't know what the ordinary person is like, you know, they're all kind of a bit sort of snobbish, you know, and that kind of factors into the sort of the dinner scene.
Yeah,
you know, she thinks it's all right. She thinks it's all right, and it's like, oh no, she's not. You know, she's not getting over this. I think it's probably played more straight, more serious than his sort of earlier horror films, which I think is kind of interesting. It is very heavy on the digital effects though. It is very late 2000s though, so you know, you might, you know, more so than I think Sam's other films, it is kind of showing its age.
Yeah, Sam's always struck me as, and we can talk about this with other films in the future, but also Oz the Great and Powerful. Yep. He's never struck me as a director that's insistent on every shot has to look perfect, and he's very much, look, if it does the job, it does the job, like it tells the story. And then we have at number 11.
My number 11 was Drag Me to Hell.
My number 11 is a film that maybe one day I will finally understand the rage for, Spider-Man 3.
What's happened to you?
I don't know. But I have to stop it.
Every time I see it, I'm still waiting to get this apparent understanding of how wretched the thing is, as the internet keeps insisting it is. But every time, I just find it's an absolutely decent so-and-so film.
My note here is almost a brilliant sequel.
Spider-Man 3 has a lot of good stuff going for
For
it.
sure.
It has
Absolutely.
it has some terrific action sequence. I mean, Sam can shoot an action sequence like nobody else. You know, the cast is all very strong throughout them. You know, some of the effects, I mean, for 2007 especially, is outstanding. Like, everything with the Sandman is just brilliant.
Oh, that's aged really well, the
Yeah.
Sandman sequence.
You can tell what Sam was trying to go with Toby in that this is the film where Peter Parker has a bit of an ego on him, and he sort of feels he can do no wrong, and he has to be taken down a peg.
Hubris, isn't it? Hubris.
This is very much about hubris, whereas the first two are about more responsibility and choice. But what really kills this film is just too much stuff. I know it's very easy to sort of make the studio and Avi around the bad people in this scenario, but I do think Sam was he should have possibly said maybe we can save the Sandman for later down the road, but instead he sort of felt, well, I have to top the bar. I have to make a film that's bigger than the last two films. And unfortunately, what you do end up with is a film that's just there's just way too much going on. And you have then, and what that leads in is awkward story decisions like Harry Osborn getting amnesia so we can pause the button on his story for the next hour or so while we focus on the symbiote and Sandman. There's there's some scenes that are, I won't say they're awful, but they are very much tone deaf, and they don't bring across what they were meant to. Like, for example, Harry and MJ dancing in the kitchen, or the dance-off scene in the nightclub. But I think what really is, I mean, we were watching the film, we'd gotten 10 minutes in. Peter Parker, he's in a very happy bubble in this film, and he doesn't want outside things to influence him. So Harry having amnesia, Peter's like, oh, this might be a good thing because I get my best friend back. MJ having a rougher time than in the last two films, he's sort of like trying to brush it off as, it'll be okay, MJ, you'll be fine, because he's in a good spot. And
he tries to give her that sort of American dream kind of thing. Oh no, if you work hard, you'll do it. And it's like, that's not always the case.
No, not at all. But yeah, so the film starts off, relatively well. It's very much, Peter's in a good place. He's got his beautiful girlfriend. He's making time to see her play. Maybe his best friend, it's not doing well, but we'll get to that. And then a meteorite falls from the sky. And that was it. Like, if the Spider-Man franchise is the beautiful Titanic ship, going through the ocean, then this is definitely the dent on the iceberg. It's just, good storytelling is always that one scene, the choices that are made through the story impact later scenes. Andy gets a new toy, which leads to Woody being jealous, which leads to Buzz and Woody being lost, which leads to them having to get back to Andy and also growing as characters.
The word is sequential. Great stories are sequential.
Yes. But bad storytelling is just when things happen. And in this case, there is nothing to connect this meteorite to Peter's life or what's going on. It just lands. And it just so happens, gosh diddly darn, lands right next to a superhero. Whereas if it landed to, I don't know, some schmuck in the city, well, we'll see what kind of story that would have been. It's just clunky. It's just clunky the way the symbiote is introduced. I think Sam does some good stuff with it, but ultimately, and I mean, this is kind of outside the movie, but Venom, in my opinion, has just always been a very lackluster Spider-Man villain that has mostly sailed by due to a very enjoyable design, but not much else. And I don't think Sam can bring that much more to the table with it. All the regular cast do a great job. I think Toby has always been really good at showing anger, and so when he shows anger in certain scenes, he's very genuinely threatening and sort of sinister. It's definitely a step up from Superman 3. Superman 3 wanted to do what if Superman was evil, but he's just kind of a dickhead, just chucking peanuts and drinking whiskey.
Superman 3 is a slog. There's nothing worse than a bad comedy.
I mean, to address the sequence I'm sure you're all foaming at the mouth over, the Peter Parker dancing through the street, the whole point of that scene is that it's cringe, that this is a nerd who tries to be cool because he's got a cool new leather jacket and he's dancing.
You shouldn't want him to go sort of with the black suit. That defeats the purpose of the arc.
Exactly. So we're meant to cringe. We're meant to say, get it off, Pete, for God's sakes. You look like a twat. And I think it effectively does that. You get the feeling that everyone involved sort of felt like we've done this twice over. People love it. We just have to up the ante and really give them a grand, big third movie. And not necessarily. They should have really learned the lessons from the first two and kept the story more streamlined and nuanced. And it's a movie that's just too big for its own good. I will say this. After all the sound and fury of the symbiote and the final battle, the final 5 minutes of the movie with Harry's death, the funeral, and then MJ and Peter meeting up for a small slow dance, I think is genuinely a beautiful way that we didn't know at the time, but certainly we know now, the end of Tobey's and Sam Raimi's trilogy. I think it's a beautiful end. It's a very mournful, it's proper Spider-Man.
It wouldn't be right to end the film on, Spidey swinging off.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be right.
So yeah, I mean, not to get into other territory, but I would easily watch this over either of the Mark Webb Amazing Spider-Man films.
Oh, yeah.
And I would definitely watch it over probably one or two of the MCU Spider-Man films. So it's Spider-Man 3. It's I don't think it's, to quote the director, awful. I think it's got a lot of good stuff going for it, but it's a shame it couldn't have been a real proper great next continuation in the story of Peter Parker. But that's my number 11. So what's your number 10?
I chose Darkman for my number 10 pick.
Ooh, that's pretty low for certain fans, I'm sure. My number 10 is the most latest of Raimi's films. It's Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Ooh.
But I never meant for any of this to happen.
I really appreciated a great deal of this film. I thought that it had a lot of good stuff going for it. I think he's left the Marvel team very much treated him well and didn't try and interfere too much. I think that he brought a lot of his best qualities to the film. I think he really worked the actors well. I mean, this is a film that very much lives and dies on its director and actors, because the script is pretty weak in spots. And I'm not even blaming the writer. It's just very much like Spider-Man 3, it's a shopping list film, where you have to include this and this and this and that. What Doctor Strange 2 does well is it carries over themes that Sam does well in his other superhero affairs, in that it's very much about a hero and villain who both want a goal in life, but it's about how they go about attaining that goal that makes one the good guy and the other the bad guy. And they play off well enough for each other. I mean, yeah, for the MCU, I mean, the problem with reviewing this film out of all of Sam's, it's inevitable you have to kind of bring up the MCU and kind of what had come previously. And
it is quite insular, let's be honest.
I mean, in context, I had stopped watching Marvel movies after Endgame. I just kind of thought I need a break from them. And the only reason I came back to watch this film was because Sam was directing it. And I thought, well, I have to do that. And when I watched it, it was...
A new Raimi film is like a once in a blue moon kind of thing at this stage.
Oh, yeah. Going to see Doctor Strange 2 was like bumping into an ex in public. And you have a very nice diplomatic, hello, how's it all been going? How are the kids? But once you walk away from each other with a smile and a wave, you feel you made the right decision all those years back, and that was how I felt. I enjoyed this film overall, and I thought it was a very solid blockbuster, but I definitely had no interest in getting back to the MCU, because this was the film where I knew officially it had gone to that point where you need to do homework before you see a film. Because if you have not seen WandaVision, or at least have a decent opinion of what happened in Endgame, you will be lost right off the bat. This is a very much a film where a lot of previous stuff matters in the plot.
Yeah.
It just jumps straight into it, which in some way makes it kind of enjoyable. There's not even kind of a build-up of, oh, the Scarlet Witch is a bad guy. I mean, it's just first scene, it's like, boom, we find out she's the one behind it all, and we get straight into the good stuff.
Yeah.
I think Benedict Cumberbatch and Elizabeth Olsen are a great hero and villain in this film. I think Liz Olsen brings a lot. Like, what makes Elizabeth Olsen work, unlike, say, Mila Kunis, is she gets what the role is. She completely understands Sam's sensibilities and how to really go proper, over the top, but genuinely creepy.
Yes.
Whereas Mila Kunis is just screaming like she's trying to prove to Daddy that she's a big, strong girl now or something.
Or was it Luke who said, she still sounds like a sort of Californian girl. She sounds like, one of those sort of socialites.
Yeah.
Because she didn't get a fancy car.
But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in this. I just really appreciated seeing a real scope to these movies again, and some very good camera work in terms of the action.
Yeah.
The biggest issue with this film really is the second act, where, to quote our friend Luke, the gratuity is introduced, where we just get this egregiously boring, dull scene of fan service where he meets the Illuminati, where, oh my god, it's Reed Richards. I mean, I mean, this whole film is basically a chase. It's sort of like the Terminator in some respects, and so you could
They
say,
even have her with the red eyes.
Yeah.
And also limping like The Shining, like Jack in The Shining.
I mean, you could say Act 2 is meant to be all right, we're going to calm down for a bit, before the chase starts up again.
But it feels like what you said about Spider-Man 3. They've just pressed pause on the film to just get this sort of, to just get these sort of studio mandated, cameos. I remember you told me like how your heart sank when Patrick Stewart showed up in the comic book accurate chair, and you said Patrick Stewart reprising his role as Professor Xavier is elder abuse. You're just like, this is elder abuse.
Oh yeah, it's straight up. I mean, it's like, look, Patrick Stewart, amazing actor, has given us some of the greatest performances, but I think at this point he's just, I mean, it's no disrespect, it's just what happens to us all. You just get older, and he really looks like he's struggling. I mean, at points you almost get the feeling he's reading it off of prompt boards. I just had nothing. There was no surge of, it's Charles Xavier, he's back, I'm so excited. I just felt empty.
Yeah, Patrick has a lovely voice as well, and I think it was sort of struggling a bit as well. I remember watching it. His voice was kind of struggling. It was a bit hoarse, a bit like my own when recording this.
Act 2 is very much where this film slumps, but I would say the initial first act and definitely Act 3 is really where the film picks up and is a lot of fun. Like, the climax is genuinely one of my favorites of the MCU. Doctor Strange takes over a dead corpse of a variant of his own and then makes a cloak out of demons, and leads to one of the unironically best Sam Raimi-ish lines. It's going to have to take more than killing me to kill me.
Ah, yeah, that's great. That was classic Raimi. My note for this was Sam Raimi's greatest hits. That's what Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is. Yeah. I would have put it up a little bit higher perhaps, but again, the sort of the middle act sort of slog kind of sadly means that it can't quite sort of get in the top 10. What I can really say about Drag Me to Hell and Darkman are that they aren't really compromised by the studio system. They are kind of still kind of have the momentum. As we say, Sam keeps the momentum going, and then when it's not, it kind of sticks out. It's almost like the soul has left the body, for that moment. It's like an out of body experience. It's like, this isn't really Raimi, is it? This is someone else. Then it comes back into the room, and the Illuminati all die horribly because there's no potential for these, and also just like, it's kind of it's a bit of that Raimi cynicism. It's a bit of that it's a bit that Raimi cynicism, like it's sort of like, oh, the movie started again, brilliant.
Yeah, I can understand some people being upset that I put this above Drag Me to Hell, but I just really had a lot more fun with it. I felt
it is fun. It is.
I felt Sam was being more true to his qualities. I didn't feel nearly as much he was throwing a bone to his diehard fans. He was just doing good by this movie. Like, I have to say, there's a lot I really respect about Sam, and this is a good example, that he comes into this Marvel movie, and he said so in interviews, not to do a Sam Raimi film, but merely to
play in the sandbox, isn't he?
Play in the Marvel sandbox, and he does a very good job. And you contrast that with the very next Marvel film, Thor: Love and Thunder, which is Taika Waititi asleep at the wheel and bummed that he has to do another Thor movie. And just says, I'm just going to make this into a terrible 2-hour Simpsons episode, pretty much. Yeah, so Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. For any Marvel haters, this is not going to convince you anyway. But for anyone who's willing to give it a shot, I'd say it's a very decent piece in a much larger and convoluted puzzle. So what's your number 9?
Spider-Man 3 above Darkman, which I think can I hear the angry mob now? This really is not the worst thing ever. Like, just, lads, you need to see more films. Like, my God. Like, oh my God.
My number 9 is probably the most forgotten of all of Raimi's films, The Gift.
All right.
What I'm seeing, a split rail fence and a pond. I can smell flowers.
This film really was a treat. An absolute stellar cast.
Oh, it's a very well cast film, and Raimi knows how to use them.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they're done very well. I do wonder how the people who love Keanu Reeves would feel about this film, because he's a very reprehensible character in it.
I just respect that so much, like, especially out of prettier actors, when they say, no, I'm happy to play a proper sleaze scumbag, So it really shows that he doesn't have an ego of himself. No, I only play pretty hot Neo or John Wick. So, like, yeah, Cate Blanchett is stellar. I have to say, I'd love to see more movies where she's the lead because she's absolutely kills it in this film. Keanu Reeves playing very much against type and does a really generally threatening and scary performance.
He is very, very scary in it.
There's what's his name, the actor?
Giovanni Ribisi from The Offer, the miniseries. Yeah, so Giovanni, yeah, he was the standout.
Giovanni, he really does a good job. He plays this incredibly sympathetic character and actually almost got a tear out of me by the end. He really plays, the film tackles pretty dark stuff for Raimi, and
it gets very dark.
Not supernaturally dark. I mean, we're talking proper dark,
like real world darkness.
And I think handles it pretty well overall.
Yeah.
The biggest flaw with this film is basically, and I'm not even talking if you're a well-worn read person of mysteries. I'm talking you just watched your average Scooby-Doo cartoon when you were a kid. You can tell the murder mystery is right from the start. I mean, it's pretty kind of obvious. I was sort of nudging Conor saying, oh, it's probably going to be, but we'll see. But having said that, I will say, while I can understand why that would turn some people off, this is a perfect example of how it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, because I really just enjoyed the journey. I wasn't strumming my fingers going, all right, we know it's so-and-so character, just reveal it. I was still fully enjoying it throughout it.
It did feel quite, it did feel a bit, and this isn't in a negative way, but I think it would have been right at home on television. I think it's not a film that you sort of miss out on if you don't see it on a big screen. It actually kind of fits quite nicely at home. It's a good sort of one to watch at home. I hope like Netflix or one of them, picks up the rights to it for a year and more people can see it. Because it seemed to be very mixed when it came out. Like people were kind of a bit unsure about it.
There was talk of it getting pushed for Oscars, performances and directing. But similar to Crime Wave, it was just, well, what is this? Because it's not by any means a conventional Oscar-winning movie. The Gift is not a film I would say will change your life, nor will it make you reevaluate cinema, but it just is a really solid, understated work with top-tier performances and some honestly, genuinely human moments that really did move me. If this came to a streaming service, I would. This is a film I hope gets rediscovered. This is a film I do hope becomes a cult classic in circles.
I think it should absolutely become a cult classic. I feel it's one of the more subdued Sam Raimi films. Like when you look at the filmography, but there's still little elements. But like,
I wouldn't say I would highly recommend, but if you ever see Going Out in the Wild, I would definitely pick it up because it really is a very compelling little human story, and it's that's my number 9. So, and I'd say now getting to the top 8, this is where we get into Sam's real good stuff. Like, we've gone from his mixed work to his pretty strong work, and now we're getting to the real gold nuggets. Like, these next 8 films I would all highly recommend. So, what's your number 8?
My number 8 was The Gift, the last experimental Sam Raimi film.
My number 8, Darkman.
There's a light that shines on every human being. But one.
It is very sort of old gothic horror. It's the man. It's part Man Who Laughs, part Phantom of the Opera. Even sort of echoes of the Invisible Man. Even parts of the Invisible Man, like with the bandages.
I think what really makes Darkman work is, we discussed how in the bottom 3 Raimi films, the biggest issue was he was partnered with actors who just didn't get his sensibilities or couldn't really grasp the sort of the timing or tone. Darkman is not that. You have Liam Neeson, who's, very much an unknown at the time and really gives it his all and is perfectly at home in Sam's mad wheelhouse, playing this constantly about to lose it, wants to be Superman, but is more closer to the Man Who Laughs, and culminates in some absolutely raucous, funny moments and some great lines. I know, but let's pretend you didn't.
Or was it? Or the line that I always love from the film. Take the fucking elephant.
Oh yeah, that take the fucking elephant scene. Yeah, it's
Which
like
you saw that in the Lighthouse Cinema, and like,
oh yeah,
everyone like lost their
big
shit.
big laugh. It's yeah, Darkman is just great. It's just seeping in atmosphere. There's so many fun, interesting ideas.
He played with fire on Crime Wave and got burnt, and now kind of, and now the sort of scar tissue had formed. He was a bit more sort of savvy with it this time around.
He goes for it. There's some great action pieces. There, you've got a very terrific cast overall. Larry Drake is a great villain adversary.
He should have been the main villain. I think the reason why I sort of put it fairly low is that once they kill him off, they sort of leave him with Stack, and Stack is just he's shit.
He's just
I don't like the character, the way it's written. I don't like the performance very much. I like the climax, and I love sort of Neeson's sort of final sort of moments. I think they're great, but just kind of the sort of core of the film, shall we say, is just kind of the
one point that I kind of felt was a bit weak, and Frances McDormand's in this film, and she does a really stellar job. She's a fantastic actress, but I do feel there was a little bit of sloppy writing with her in that both times the plot gets worse for Darkman is because of her directly causing it. Like, the first time she goes up to her boss and says, "Hey, I have documents I shouldn't have seen." And of course that gets her boyfriend killed. And then the next time she goes up to her boss and says, "Oh, Peyton's alive," which again is directly, what makes everything worse. So both times the story gets worse, it's her fault.
I think it's quite a good film. Like, I appreciate its kind of lo-fi charm. Sam Raimi's films, do have a great sort of lo-fi kind of homemade sort of quality to them.
Even its flaws are sort of a charm to it. It really is a wonderfully fun, pulpy sort of affair. And
yes, that's the word for Darkman, isn't it? That's the word I have, and that's the word I think we're both in agreement over.
Yeah. So that's my number 8. What's your number 7?
I chose Army of Darkness for my number 7.
My number 7 is The Quick and the Dead.
In this town, you're either one or the other.
A lot of these films, Sam really was good at either picking a cast or just being handed a great cast. It's a perfect contrast to Love in the Game, because both of these are very much star vehicles. You have Kevin Costner and Sharon Stone leading the production mainly and saying, "I want this director." But the difference is Kevin Costner just has his miserable, mopey face in the camera for 2.5 hours. Whereas Sharon Stone, you can tell, is far more willing to sort of give face to a lot of the other terrific supporting cast, everywhere from Gene Hackman to Russell Crowe, Leonardo DiCaprio, Lance Henriksen. You just have some absolutely stellar actors in this. There's a wonderful style to it all. The plot is very straightforward. It's probably been done on 1,000 westerns beforehand, but Sam really does give it a nice kick up the gut to really give it some energy.
It's like you say, it's not necessarily how it's written, it's how you sort of shoot it, isn't it?
And I think it really comes together in some very solid set pieces. If I have any flaws with it, really, is I just simply think some of Sam's quirks kind of, they go a bit too far in some cases. Like
Keith David's one is a bit kind of, it's a bit like a sore thumb. It was kind of one of those things where it's like, maybe someone should have said Sam. I don't think that's quite sort of I think that's kind of taking you out of the film. I don't think that's sort of right for the tone you're going for.
It goes a bit too Looney Tunes at that point, but there is some but to balance that, there's some terrific, the dinner scene between Sharon and Gene Hackman is terrific.
Gene Hackman's brilliant. Gene Hackman's perfect villain. I think the two of them are very sort of well balanced, and like it's just a great cast film. I think I like a lot of people just sort of, I can appreciate it more now than say if I was sort of watching it in the cinema in the 90s. It's very sincere. Like that's the note I have, I think, for this and for Army of Darkness. They're very sincere films. Like they're not sort of, Army of Darkness is funny, but like it's still like sort of sincere. It's not sort of, oh yeah, but it's all a bit silly. There's no turn to the camera. It's like, oh, it's a bit silly. It's kind of like, no, everyone is like, oh, this is a real thing. That's the thing, I suppose, as
They're
well.
fully committed to realizing these worlds and these characters.
That's the thing about Raimi, isn't it? That it is sincere. As I say, people are sort of, in especially modern filmmaking, I think it can be afraid of sincerity or like genuine. genuine stuff, like especially like sort of genre stuff. You know.
I don't really have much else to say about The Quick and the Dead other than I would absolutely recommend it. I think it's a really solid, even if you're not a fan of Westerns, it's just a really enjoyable flick. I'm very happy to see it does have a bit of cult status, like it is getting re-released, and it has gotten a 4K release, which I would highly recommend it. The Quick and the Dead, it's quick and they're dead. Definitely check it out.
Enough said.
Yeah. So your number 6?
I chose Spider-Man, the first Spider-Man.
Right. I chose another first movie, the one that started it all, though not necessarily the fairest of them all. My number 6 was The Evil Dead.
All right.
Compared to a lot of other directors where their first movies are more kind of a novelty, like they're more just known for being their first film, like for example, and I'm sure there are fans of it, but Dark Star, if you're going to talk about Dark Star, it's mostly because, oh, did you know this was John Carpenter's first film?
Would we also say Edgar Wright's first film, A Fistful of Fingers?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I don't know why anyone else is checking that film out. Despite all its limitations, all its budgetary issues, all its, obvious bad makeup jobs or things like that, it all sort of adds to the atmosphere. It's,
as you say, the limitations, the rough around the edges kind of approach, I think The Evil Dead is definitely the gold standard debut film.
By all accounts, this should have been an installment in the long-running Best of the Worst series by the fellas at Red Letter Media. This should have been, some kids from Michigan, they got funding by dentists and others and went to make a film in the woods, and oh my god,
like all the way out in Tennessee.
Yeah, like the bloody hell, these. But it just really works. I mean, there's just
it's competent. That's what saves it from the Best of the Worst. It's a competent film.
It's insane, but it really is competent. There's some great scares, some terrific usage. There's just a wonderful atmosphere throughout, and yeah, when it's just Raimi and Campbell in that, it really becomes just the fun spook house romp. There's a great bit where Bruce Campbell goes down to the basement. And inextricably, there's a record player and a camera there, a projector, and it just, I absolutely thought that was a brilliant sequence.
With the sort of the blood dripping down, like the whole sort of room goes like that's kind of the first sort of reality bending moment of those films,
I think the two things that sink this film from being in a higher spot for me, firstly, and this is in no disrespect, they all did their best, but the acting is a bit subpar. It adds in a strange way to the tone of the movie, the slightly hokey acting, but it does keep you a little at bay. Whereas the cast of, say, its sequel really get the tone and are solid actors throughout. Whereas this one, you don't know if they're in on the joke or if they are trying too hard to give you a real performance. And the second thing, I mean, we have to talk about it briefly, is the tree assault scene it's the one part of Raimi's filmography where it just becomes quite honestly tasteless.
Yeah, that's a shit bit. That was always a terrible idea.
It's what happens when you get a bunch of 20-year-olds in the late 70s saying, "Hey, what can we do to really shock people with our movie?" And
unfortunately, there's a long history of misogyny in horror films.
Yeah, it just goes that too far. Like I said, we were watching the film and I said, "Look, you could have done this well, but you just wouldn't have done that last bit." But apart from that, yeah, this film really is, in many respects, a terrific success story. That these bunch of kids from Midwest, raised enough funds from dentists and people around the town.
Pretty much door stopping them and like.
Yeah, all credit to them. But yeah, The Evil Dead. I think it's a terrific film. It's still in many respects a genuine triumph of anyone who wants to get into filmmaking. And so yeah, that's at number 6. But so now we're into the top 5.
My number 5 is The Quick and the Dead.
My number 5 is the original Spider-Man from 2002.
With great power comes great responsibility.
This is my gift.
Wow.
It is my curse.
Who are you?
Who am I? I'm Spider-Man.
This is a film that I will always have a lot of nostalgia and love for, and watching it back for this retrospective in the context of all his other films, I have to say it really does hold a lot of water all these years later. It tells the origin of Spider-Man exceedingly well. I think Tobey Maguire, and I will go to my grave. I think he was perfect for the role, and I think he and Sam instantly got that Peter Parker is this sort of shy, awkward dork, and he makes a genuinely believable nerd. Like, he's not just, put glasses on a hot actor, and he really conveys a character that's yearning for connection and companionship in life, but just really struggles communicating that to people.
As so many of us do,
I think Kirsten Dunst is perfect as sort of the ideal girl next door that, as the movie progresses, Peter realizes is very much her own person, and and the danger Spider-Man can bring to her. William Dafoe is, absolutely perfect as the Green Goblin, regardless if the costume holds him back a little bit. Supporting cast overall is just tremendous. Cliff Robinson and Rosemary Harris, they are wonderful as Uncle Ben and Aunt May. All the little bits like
we always come back to the casting. Like, they really cast well for that first Spider-Man. I mean, I think Tobey's the best. Tobey is like Peter Parker to me, and always will be.
It's right up there with Richard Donner's Superman in that they just cast exceedingly well all overall, and they really bring a believability to this world. Raimi said in interviews, I didn't want to make a film that was sort of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's just, no, you utterly believe in this story, no matter how preposterous it gets, and the real drama and heartache of Peter Parker and Spider-Man, and it really comes through.
It's his Valentine to the early days, sort of those first sort of issues of Spider-Man, those sort of original Lee and Ditko comics.
Yeah. I've been wondering for the past couple of years, why don't we consider this as strong as its sequel? And it really came down to two things on this most recent rewatch. The first is that some of the dialogue is a bit meme-worthy. It's like it's fun dialogue, but it's more you're laughing at it, not with it sort of dialogue. You've lines like, "I think I have a superhero stalker."
I'm something of a scientist myself.
Yeah, it's dialogue that's not necessarily George Lucas level uncomfortable or awkward, but just even great actors can struggle really getting something out of it. It's like Tobey Maguire's a great actor, but even he really struggles with, "It's you who's out, Gobby. Out of your mind." The second issue with this film that I think keeps it from being as well loved as the second is, I have to say, just probably not the best cinematography. The cinematographer was Dan Burgess, who directed, amongst other films, Terminator 3, and he brings this sort of muddy, strange orange look to his film that it's not necessarily bad, but it just makes the film inherently feel like a late 90s, early 2000s film. Whereas Bill Pope coming out of the sequel breathes such a fresh, modern look to the whole thing. Whereas this one...
Also the sequel uses sort of the widescreen, the CinemaScope. It's a bit more... The second one looks a bit more cinematic.
Yeah. Also, and we all know this, some of the CGI is dated, but honestly not terribly. It's just certain scenes like Peter in his homemade costume do make you go a bit, ooh, for the time. But other than that, I know some people don't think of it as fondly, and some people might say it's a bit of a flawed work overall, but I really do think, compared to so many other superhero films that are just by the numbers, seen it all before, this one really stands out. It's right up there, in my opinion, with the likes of Superman the movie or Batman Begins as far as an origin film. It really pays respects to the character. It understands at its roots what people love about the character. And by the end of it, you're just left on a high as Peter Parker swings through the city,
One last thing to say about Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. The Danny Elfman score is great. Maybe it's our generation, but, it is a fantastic score. I don't think it sounds too much like Batman. If anything, it's kind of more experimental, sort of Men in Black. If there's anything, it's a bit more... It owes more to Men in Black than it does Batman or Darkman.
We come to number 4. Your number 4 is
The Evil Dead.
My number 4. It's in a strange way how Rich and Jay compared They Live in John Carpenter's, where it may be number 1 in their heart, but not quite as far as a technical work. My number 4 is Army of Darkness.
And a time of evil.
You shall die!
When the world needed a hero.
This one was so about to die!
What it got was him.
Groovy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Bruce Campbell versus Army of Darkness. This is a film that is just so unabashedly, unapologetically, unashamedly, absolutely in love with itself and just happy to be doing what it's doing. This is that kid in the sandpit who's just running around going, doesn't have a care in the world, doesn't care what anyone else is thinking of him.
I would say it's Sam Raimi and a JCB scooping up the sandpit. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
And planting his flag. And
I want to stress, it's not that I think that it was an easy production for them. Oh, no. This film was a grind to make by all accounts. Bruce Campbell really worked his head off getting this as good as it could have been.
I love the story he says about, like he got married to the costume designer and said, if we can survive Army of Darkness, we can survive anything.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite stories.
Yeah. So I'm not in any way saying this was an easy film for them. I'm saying that it was probably to them just the most unabashedly fun, where there was no kind of, well, what will the critics think or what will mainstream... This was to them, look, we just want to make the most fun, the most unashamedly us film. Play to all our strengths. We have the money to do it. Let's go for it. And so, whereas Drag Me to Hell is Sam kind of, you feel a bit throwing the bone to his hardcore fans. This one, he's like, for anyone who wants Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2, this isn't that. It's its own thing. It's very proud of what it is. This is an adventure picture. This is Ash Williams goes back in time, gets a mechanical hand, and fights an army of skeletons.
Oh yeah. Sam Raimi wanted Crime Wave to be the ultimate picture in entertainment, as said. But I think ultimately Army of Darkness takes that crown. I think Army of Darkness is much more the ultimate sort of fun time at the movies. And I know I ranked it at number 7. I do really like it. I like the sincerity of it. And I kind of appreciate it because let's be honest, like a lot of people when they're fans of something, be it a science fiction show like Star Trek or Doctor Who, or science fiction film, like Star Wars, or any big franchise like the Marvel stuff, like they all just kind of want the same thing but bigger. They kind of just want you to do that and then do it a bit bigger, maybe bigger stakes and things. But I kind of like that, maybe it is because I kind of always see the Evil Dead as horror, but I do appreciate that they kind of tried they sort of tried to switch up genres, make it a bit more fun, a bit more sort of comedic. And some people mightn't like that, but it's very healthy for a creative to recognize that they don't think that they can do it again.
That's my one question to you, is what makes The Evil Dead higher to you than Army of Darkness? And neither of us is right or wrong.
I think The Evil Dead is just more of a visceral experience. I think the Evil Dead gets under my skin more so than Ray Harryhausen, Ray Harryhausen style skeletons, which are great. Don't worry. I love Army of Darkness too, but I think I just sort of vibed with the sort of first one is the ultimate example of a great debut. A great feature film debut. It has a great sort of mission statement. You say it's a best of the worst film, but competent.
What makes Army of Darkness work so well is that the only chaotic element of the movie is Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi. Everyone else is playing it dead straight, and that's what makes it funny. If they
it's like what we say about Airplane or Hot Fuzz. Like the reason why those films work are that we know it's a comedy, but they don't.
I mean, the best summation of what makes Army of Darkness work so well is the love sequence between Ash and Sheila, where basically she walks in, gives him a blanket, he gives her a bit of snark, she slaps him across the face, and then they immediately go to lovemaking.
Give me some sugar, baby.
This is Sam Raimi saying, I know what the scene is meant to be, but I don't really care about fleshing the scene out, and let's be honest, you all don't care either.
It's funnier the way it's done.
So let's just go to it. It's just
he's proper fucking Clark Gable in that moment. Like he gets that, and he's just it's proper, like sort of like the shot and everything. It's done very sort of like Victor Fleming. It's like Victor Fleming's come back from the dead and taken over the directing of Army of Darkness.
But yeah, so what's your number 3?
A Simple Plan.
We Sing.
Plan was to sit on the money till we decide that it's safe to keep. It's like there's two sides now. We're all in this together, man. If you had to pick right now, who would it be? You're my brother.
From now on, we have to be thinking ahead all the time.
If For Love of the Game is the least Raimi, this one is sort of very like sort of restrained, but like it actually has a very compelling core to it. I think it's a very strong film. I think it's a very human film. That's the thing. For Love of the Game is like vacuous Hollywood shite, and A Simple Plan is a very human drama, and it's a very real drama. I mean, we have the late great Bill Paxton in the lead role, and Billy Bob Thornton as his brother, and
they're amazing.
Oh, they are so good, and they're like, you really believe them. Like, you really believe them as siblings, and as I say, like, it's a great sort of human drama. You know, I think it reminded me a lot of. You remember we watched that film Prisoners with Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal. That was a tense experience. That was like a really kind of experience. But it was a very kind of you're kind of there, and you're like, it really kind of compelled you, because you're just like, how far are they gonna go? Like how are they gonna do it? You know. And I really respect the film for that. And I'm not gonna give away any of the twists of it, but you know, it sort of just when it just adds that extra bit to it, you're just like, oh god. It's a really compelling story. I think Sam knew that the story was like, you know, so dramatically rich, and it's just a really dramatically sound film, and you know, it's an unforgettable film.
A Simple Plan is a movie I should have a bone to pick with, because when this film was released,
a little bit like Evil Ash.
I got a bone to pick with you, but. Yeah, because when this film came out, it was followed with a lot of press coverage of discussing Sam Raimi and his career up to that point, and a lot of backhanded compliments over how he's finally made a proper real movie. And like I said, I researched long and hard to find the best possible quality versions of each of his films, and I was able to find, you know, a 4K of Army of Darkness, or a UK Blu-ray of Crime Wave, or a 4K of Quick and the Dead. The best HD version I could find of A Simple Plan was a German Blu-ray from over 10 years ago. And that really does say it all about movies and
their shelf life.
And their shelf life in the public's eyes. Because, because here's the thing. I would love, in some respects, for A Simple Plan to be a rubbish film, and to really dog on it as, see, this is what happens when you push a director to do something they're not used to. But it is a great film. That's the thing.
That's the problem. Why did you have to be so good, you fecker?
Yeah, it really is it's a wonderfully human drama. Even though it's a harrowing, tense film, it's beautifully shot with some gorgeous winter stuff.
Oh, it uses snow really well. The way it uses the sort of snowy Minnesota landscape.
I almost joked at points, if you walked in the room at the wrong point, you'd assume it was like a very nice Christmas film.
Yeah.
It's got, you know, very hauntingly unspoken score by Danny Elfman.
It's a woodwind score, like which is very unusual for Danny Elfman. Danny Elfman's quite brassy, or sort of experimental.
It's hard to really talk about this film much because you don't want to spoil anything. And this is a film that I would, if you can find a copy out there, by all means, definitely give it a check. This is, out of all of Sam's films, the one I most hope will get a proper remaster and a re-release at some point. So.
I remember you saying the reason why you wanted to do this sort of big retrospective is because lots of people talk about the early Raimi and then the Spider-Man onwards Raimi, but his sort of his experimental era, his sort of late 90s through to 2000 run is quite overlooked, isn't dwelled upon when people look at his career as a whole.
People will, and it's not even out of any malice, it's just what we do. We pigeonhole a director to, okay, you make these type of films. You know, and it just happens no matter how much. Quentin Tarantino, he makes, you know...
Violent black comedies.
And John Carpenter, he makes sort of gritty, edgy, you know, 80s films, even though he was more varied than that. It'd be like what if Bruce Campbell attempted to do a proper straight Shakespearean play, and did a genuinely good job. You would still just always be like, well, it's not really what we pay to see Bruce Campbell do.
It's kind of, that image now is reminding me of Last Action Hero.
Yeah.
with the Arnold Schwarzenegger Hamlet.
Not to be. But yeah, Simple Plan is definitely the crown jewel of Raimi's experimental era, as you call it. It's just a very compelling drama. It's very expertly told. Sam reins his stuff in, but not in any way to cheat himself or to try and hide himself from people. He just really displays that he can tell a great story with great actors in front of the camera. The only thing that stops A Simple Plan from being in higher than number 3 for me is that, and not to spoil anything, but for the most part the movie's very much about real human drama, and only in the final scenes of the movie do they introduce a straightforward threat. And even though it's well done, it did feel a bit like, okay, well, you were doing so well by just examining these characters and the choices they make, and now you're bringing in a proper, okay, we've got to take a stand or else bad things are going to happen.
Yeah,
and
is it kind of one of those things of like, just because you think, oh well, it's got to have, these kind of films have to have one of that.
It has to have a climax, basically. And it's still well done, and it leads to a beautiful scene between Billy Bob Thornton and Bill Paxton.
Oh, it's so heartbreaking, that scene.
Oh, it really is.
Without giving anything away, it's so like, it's such a sad scene.
A Simple Plan. By all means, it's easily, in both our opinions, Raimi's third best film. Mm-hmm. And if you can find a copy, definitely check it out. And hopefully one day we can see it in stunning true 4K. I would love to see it in that format. It deserves it. But yeah, that's A Simple Plan, number 3. And now we come to our top 2. And I think, let's be honest, Mr. Jackson, I think we both knew, even before we started this retrospective, it was always going to come between these two films.
Yes, it was.
No matter what else we saw, it was always going to be these two. And so it was just a case of, well, which one? So, and I really did struggle between which two, because one film is far truer to Raimi, but the other film is just such, in my opinion, everything he's learned done perfectly. So what's your number 2 pick?
I know what you're going to say.
You do?
Yeah, just because I've known you for nearly 10 years, I think it's a foregone conclusion what your number 1 is. And like I say, it was not an easy decision to make. I put Spider-Man 2.
My number 2, and this is probably outside of my Drag Me to Hell ranking, this is probably going to get the most irk from certain Raimi fans, but my number 2 is Evil Dead 2. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience in the cinema. There is never been anything like Evil Dead 2, nor will there ever be anything like Evil Dead 2. Sam Raimi couldn't do Evil Dead 2 again. I mean, I love Army of Darkness, but even diehard fans of Army of Darkness will say the weakest part of that movie is when it's Bruce and Sam sort of repeating Evil Dead 2 in the windmill. Evil Dead 2 is everything they did well on Evil Dead, but this time just a tone, a situation, just wholly uniquely its own. It's in one part's a comedy, but also absolutely committed to the scares. It's Bruce Campbell just acting his socks off and doing everything possible to entertain you every second. It's just these two just working at the top of their talents. I mean, they've done works afterwards, but it's never been as so perfectly symbiotic as Evil Dead 2.
It crystallizes the Sam Raimi stamp, doesn't it? The Sam Raimi sort of signature.
You knew you were getting from here on out. Like Evil Dead, ooh, you can do a sort of horror.
It's one of those. I know you say it's not really a cult film now, like, and that's true. It's been absorbed by the mainstream. I think it's great. Like, we watched this for the marathon together, and I think it was on television late one night, and I was just like, I know I've already watched it. I have to watch it again. It's just kind of. It's just one of those. It's one of, like you say, it's lightning in a bottle. It's a once in a lifetime kind of film. Obviously, I think you saw my notes, so you kind of know where it's going to rank now. It's one of those films that makes you want to go out and make films, and I think that's kind of That's the thing. Well, the two of them are. That's why it was so hard to make this decision.
That's a perfect.
They both really want.
That's a perfect what you just said right there. Evil Dead 2, and I'll always call it this. Evil Dead 2 is a filmmaker's movie. In that
that's one of my notes here. Yeah, like.
It's a film that other filmmakers adore and other film lovers, because it's just wholly its own thing. There is no hanging on to conventions and just kind of, oh well, we don't want to upset the audience, or we don't want, you can tell there was not a test screening. No. Test screening didn't even sniff this movie. This was just so unashamedly, let's put this out there.
That one escaped like a deadite spirit from the Necronomicon.
The other two Evil Dead films, as great as they are, did have some degree of that. Army of Darkness, the ratings board were vindictive pricks.
They always have been to Sam Raimi's films.
They, I just love that story he tells where he went over to New York to plead that it deserved a PG-13, and the spokesperson stood up and said, "Mr. Raimi, twice you have tossed our ratings back in our face." And it was like, okay, yeah, so you don't forget and you don't forgive. And then the Evil Dead, despite how great it is, you can tell it is Raimi a little bit. what can I do to make this very appealing to the exploitation crowd? Oh, I get it. Tree assaults or really over the top gore and stuff. Whereas Evil Dead 2 it's not even trying to, like, it's not trying to please the fans of the first film. It's not trying to be a conventional horror film. It's not trying to please the teen blood splatter crowd like Friday the 13th.
No.
It's just its own thing. It is funny because if you think of this in the timeline of Sam's filmography, he's done the Evil Dead that got him on the map.
For sure.
He's done Crime Wave that 2 people saw and left.
One of them was Kim Newman.
Yes, and now he has to have a second chance to really, and you almost get the feeling he was like, look, it's almost like how Stan Lee described the Fantastic Four. Look, if I'm going to quit comic books, I might as well. I get the feeling Sam almost thought, look, if I'm going to just make one film that is so unashamedly myself. It's just Raimi. You almost get the feeling that he's saying, look, if filmmaking's not for me, I might as well just give them one big, this is who I am definitively.
It was his Raging Bull. That's what it was. You know, Martin Scorsese made Raging Bull, and he was kind of getting sick of, like, the movie making business. And, like, I mean, he still loved films, but he's just like, is it still fucking worth it? And that was, Raging Bull, I think, was going to be a sort of farewell to cinema. And then, you know, people embraced it and, you know, kept making films up until the present.
But yeah, like, there's not much else to say about Evil Dead 2. It's everyone's seen it, everyone loves it. It's endlessly rewatchable. It's the only flaws I have with it. First off, the final special effect of the film is a bit clunky. And believe you me, I love the effects of Evil Dead 2, no matter how shoddy they can look at points. It all adds to the beautiful atmosphere.
They have a charm. That's what they have.
But the final beastie flying over to Ash does just look a little bit, you know, it just looks like they'd run out of money a bit by that point. This should have been a really wonderful defiant yes moment, and it just kind of makes you go, oof.
The one in Army of Darkness is better.
Much better. And the second thing really is, and it's not the movie's fault, it's just a shame that that's all people wanted out of Sam and Bruce afterwards. It's that strong and lasting a work that they've just been always hoping for another Evil Dead, another Ash Williams adventure. And
I think maybe the time has passed.
The time has passed. You know, we've had 3 wonderful adventures with Ash Williams in the cabin and the Deadites, and we've had a terrific fun TV show. Let other filmmakers take this material and do it. And I will give Sam and co this. I really do respect that with their more recent Evil Dead things, they're very much saying, look, we can't do Evil Dead 2 again. That was a one and done miracle. We just go back to the horror roots, do your own thing, but don't try to do, you know, who's laughing now and all that stuff. So it's, Evil Dead 2, look, you've all seen it. You all love it. We're no different. You know, we're not trying to stray from the path well trodden. Go see it. It's the most out of all these films. It is the most definitive of who Sam Raimi is as a filmmaker. Go see it. It's great.
It's peak Raimi.
Yeah. And now, so number 1 by process of elimination. Your number 1 was?
My number 1 was Evil Dead 2.
And my number 1, it's Evil Dead 2 is peak Raimi and it's definitive of who he is. But this film just encapsulates all of that plus the growing maturity of those indie films that he did between Evil Dead. This is, in my opinion, there are so few of these out there, and I called it a perfect movie, and it is Spider-Man 2.
Ladies and gentlemen, fasten your seatbelts.
Spider-Man 2 is a film that every time I loved as a kid, and as the years have gone on and I've gone back to it, every time it just gets better and better. All the things that there may have been an issue with of the first film are fixed. The CGI is near perfect, especially for 2004 standards. The dialogue is genuinely terrific throughout, not in a kind of wink-wink that's a bit sort of ironically funny. No. And Bill Pope just absolutely makes the film look crisp and mature.
It's a beautiful looking film, absolutely.
Yeah. It's there, like, I really don't want to say too much about this film that hasn't already been said, but just everything about, like, every element of this film. It's sort of like, bring it one last time back to Jay and Rich talking about John Carpenter. It's very much when they talk about The Thing, where The Thing is just a perfectly constructed movie. Every element works. Every element works in this film. All the cast members work. Every scene transition, every scene dissolve, the pacing, the character beats, Peter's arc in the movie. Everything works. Like, when I watch this film, every time I just try in the back of my mind to find something I don't like about it. Maybe there was one scene that stood out and made me go, oof. Or maybe there was, one line of dialogue. And apart from one or two very quick shots of CGI that do feel a little dated, I can't find anything. It's just that high a standard. It's just everything works. Even James Franco, for the first time and last time, being genuinely compelling as a broken, bereft, rich kid without his daddy in his life. It really is just a stunning piece of cinema. Like, Tobey Maguire and Sam Raimi. I mean, how rare is it for a movie to genuinely spend the majority, like the first hour of your movie, pushing down your hero into the dirt and putting your foot on their throat, and not in a heroic way, not in a I gotta keep fighting because I'm the hero, but just really pathetic. Like the little bits, like where he's in the party trying to go for a nibble or a drink and he just keeps missing. Just the little bits that dig and make Peter Parker's life.
It's, as I say, it's the age old thing of, like, a lot of great drama, and a lot of great drama comes from, like, a lot of unfairness. Do you know what I mean? And also, like, the best Spider-Man stories, and this is the best Spider-Man film. It never, at the risk of sounding like a despairing Gary King in The World's End, it never got better after that night. After that one, but like that film is the best Spider-Man film because all great Spider-Man stories deal with Peter Parker struggling to maneuver life. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that, because it's so true, it doesn't stop at school. You don't suddenly figure shit out and take the magic potion and become a competent adult. You have to fucking stumble and fucking find your way through. And I think I think the film is fantastic for that. I love how they adapt Dr. Octopus. I love Alfred Molina as Doc Ock. He's great. I loved Willem Dafoe as well.
He's right up. No, what makes him a step up from Willem Dafoe, and not to take anything away from Willem Dafoe.
I loved him as well, but like Willem Dafoe is an unrepentant bastard, and he's great at that. But like, there's such a great universal monsters-esque tragedy
to Doc Ock.
Molina.
I would say Molina is right up there with Robert Patrick, as they are both two of my favorite examples of an actor who is working so well with the visual effect. They are like in perfect symbiosis with the visual effects crew. And both just complement each other so well. Neither gets lost within the other. Doc Ock nor Robert Patrick as the T-1000 become lost as just a special effect. Their character and charm comes through effortlessly, but at the same time, the effects don't get lost within this incredible performance. They just are perfectly in harmony with each other. Like we talked about Doctor Strange 2, and what works well in Doctor Strange 2 is what Sam Raimi perfected with Spider-Man 2, which is the hero and villain both having a similar goal in life, but it's just how they go about it that makes one the villain.
The parallels.
And it's so beautifully symbolized. What makes Spider-Man 2 so perfect for me is it just tells the best superhero story, which is the best conventional superhero story. We're not talking a deconstruction or postmodern look like Watchmen, just a very much you truly believe in this bigger than life character and the exploits they go through. And what it does is it's the hero looking in the mirror and saying, why would I want to be a hero? Why should I be a hero? And how the movie answers.
It takes its toll. That's the thing. It takes
its toll on the person. Life doesn't suddenly become miraculous for him. And the movie,
which as I said, is the same for all of us.
Yeah.
After leaving school,
the movie answers definitively that Peter Parker is a hero.
He is.
It's not Spider-Man, and it never was. It's not the powers. It's not the costume. It's just that Peter Parker is the hero. That's the thing about Spider-Man's origins, is that by all accounts, his origin is so similar to most of the villains he's fought. He was just in the right place at the right time to be given the gift of a special superpower. But whereas the other super villains had small egotistical goals in life, I'd like to be rich, I'm going to lord it over the normies, Peter Parker is inherently a hero, and he just wants to do good, and he will. Like the burning building scene in Spider-Man 2 where he just, without no costumes, no powers, he just runs right in. That is so vital to understanding the character. I'm talking about all the stuff that, is sort of like less revered because the other stuff is just so plain. The action is spectacular. There is a reason why all these years later, the train sequence is still talked about in hushed reverence. Yeah, I'm not going to make this whole podcast about Spider-Man 2 as much as I want to.
Yes, we could easily do that.
It's, but it really is just I'll always say this about Spider-Man 2. It is a indie human drama masquerading in blockbuster clothing. It's the perfect, kids get their Spider-Man scooters and Spider-Man slippers that Christmas. Audiences get a great, worthwhile film that they'll be talking about for years to come. I still have yet to see as good a superhero film since 2004. And I'd be surprised if it changes anytime soon. Evil Dead 2 is a perfect summation of Sam Raimi at his peak, but this is a perfect movie. It's just everything Sam is, plus the restraints that come with producing a blockbuster for mainstream audiences, working in perfect harmony. I keep using that word a lot, but Spider-Man 2 really is a film in harmony.
It is.
The only flaw I have with the whole thing, apart from some effect shots, and it's not even the film's fault, is just that beautiful, wonderful goblin reveal for Harry Osborn's character, and you just have that slight sinking feeling of, we've peaked. It's not going to get any better than this. Spider-Man 3 is, that's why Spider-Man 3 gets as bad as a rap, I think, as it does, because it just could not compete with this film.
I find myself thinking back to what Robert Tapper said in the Incredibly Strange Film Show, where he was asked about Sam Raimi, and it's quite good looking at it now. It's very prescient, I want to say. He says, I think Sam Raimi has the potential to be, I think Sam has the potential for like a true great sort of American classic, like a Capra or a Spielberg. And that came out in 1988, and ultimately we got it in 2004. I think he finally got his great sort of American crowd pleasing motion picture that everyone loves.
To sum up, Sam Raimi, the reason he's my favorite director is not necessarily because he makes the best films, because that's completely subjective. It's not because his filmography is of expert quality throughout, because it's not. Although I have to say, compared to some other directors, the fact that he only had one proper duffer for us is pretty astounding.
Oh yeah, good quality control, more or less.
The reason I respect Sam Raimi and love him the most is because directors at their heart are, let's be honest, egotists. You almost have to be a director. That's not a criticism of being a director. To be a director, you need to have enough ego to walk on set and say, I'm right, you're wrong, do what I say. But whereas other directors, even the directors I really admire, you get the feeling they come on the set and say, what would a Spielberg shot be like? How can I make this more Wes Anderson? Now, what would Tarantino do for this? You feel that they almost want to emphasize that, put their stamp and say, this is my movie. With Sam Raimi, you get the feeling, even in his more out there maneuvers and manics, you always get the feeling Sam, he does not give two Fs whether or not this is more a Sam Raimi film. In his mind, it's whatever makes this film better. To heck with, ensuring that, it's my film, as long as it is a good film that audiences enjoy. He's always thinking about the audience first and foremost. Now, that's not to say he's simply thinking of cheap thrills, but he is always foremost not letting his own biases and egos get in the way. He doesn't come onto a film set and say, all right, guys, now, before we get started, here's how you can make it more Raimi-esque. And I just really appreciate that in this age when, so many directors, want to emphasize their stamp of approval on a work, and Sam is just perfectly content doing a great job that he can, as we've seen with the recent Doctor Strange.
Yeah, he doesn't think he's not above the material or anything. He's kind of like, all right, this is what I'm doing. This is what will pay the bills. I'll do it to the best of my ability.
It's almost tragic in a way, because Sam is, apart from Crime Wave, he's always very much taken the shoulder of the blame for any movie that missed the mark a bit. He was very harsh on himself, saying he offered nothing new to the Western genre in Quick and the Dead, which I disagree with. I think we'll end with a quote, because I think we've said all we need to. So
yeah, the only other thing I'll add is the reason why, as I say, I love Spider-Man 2 and Evil Dead 2, and the reason why Evil Dead 2 ultimately won is because Evil Dead 2 is kind of a little bit more self-contained than Spider-Man 2.
Fair enough.
They do that lovely recap, but I think sort of the great thing about the Evil Dead films is that they're all very episodic.
Yeah.
And they sort of soft reboot every time. They kind of just try it again, and I think and I think that the second one just kind of does the premise a bit better. But but it's really difficult picking between the two of them.
No, they're two. So I will say, before I get to this final quote, Conor, overall, 7 days in this January of 2023, how was it? How was it watching 15 films by Sam Raimi?
I think I think it was good. I think it was good to watch them all, to sort of to do a great big retrospective. And you know, I've never really been someone to go out clubbing, so it was like revisiting an old friend. That's what it was. It was revisiting an old friend, and you know, getting to experience memories that we were a part of, and memories from before our time.
And that's a perfect way of describing it. I will say it was like meeting an old friend, but discovering new exciting things about them you didn't know already. And yeah, so, you know, as ludicrous as it sounds, Sam, if you're out there and if you ever stumble upon this, we wish you all the very best with the rest of your career, and we can't wait to see what you'll do next. And to end on, here's a quote from Sam. In 19...
Here's a quote from our boy Sam Raimi.
Yeah. This was Sam Raimi talking in 1995, just to give you context, because it sounds almost like he could have said this just last year. Maybe I've had my time in the sun. It's hard to say. I know one thing. I've never really been in line with the taste of audience overall, and either audiences will get even further away, or they'll begin to turn towards what I like. I can see exactly 90 minutes into the future. About the length of a motion picture. But yeah, so... That's all from me, Andre Griffin, and my good pal Conor Jackson, and we're signing off on the 23rd of January, 2023.
See ya.